hold music. You want to avoid it, and so do your customers. So say goodbye to hold music and hello to faster, smarter support with Salesforce. Make service more personal and agents more productive using built-in trusted AI. Then watch costs and wait times drop and satisfaction soar. Support customers in a whole new way with Service GPT. Learn how at salesforce.com/service GPT.
Driver recruiting and retention efforts focus on pay packages. We cover the first quarter's earnings season. Eggs and lettuce recalls. Could blockchain help? I'm JP.
And I'm Chad.
And we cover all these topics and more on this week's episode of What the Truck, sponsored by Link America, your link to reliable shipping.
So, what you drinking, JP?
Oh, you know me. Got that Bell's Two Hearted, straight out of Comstock, Michigan. It is a very balanced IPA with fruit and not too much bitter.
Yada yada. I know all about it. I don't know why you keep trying to make it sound new. You're drinking the same thing every time. No, we all love it. We all love it. No denying it. I am continuing to try something new each time. This time, actually, it's a blend of the new and old. It's Rodenbach. Ever heard of it?
No.
Have you ever had a Flemish red brown made originally out of Belgium?
I don't believe I have.
That's a shame. You're missing out.
I've had red ales.
Would you like to try some?
Sure.
Okay. Well, no.
Thank you.
I didn't mean of mine. All right.
I mean, compared to Two Hearted.
Your face. Oh, if only they were recording that.
Never again.
Give it a chance. It's a traditional it's a mixed fermentation type of ale, and
with mixed results.
Apparently, but it's in oak vats, and it's like the 3/4 young ale and 1/4 old ale, which means that the ale was in old oak vats for 2 years.
It's kind of like a sour, shaken up apple juice.
No, it's not like apple juice. That's insulting. After all that they did, this is a tradition. Barry, you want to try? Okay, Barry, I'm not going to speak about it. Well, anyway, it's going to be fun to imbibe upon this as we talk about the exciting headlines of the week. And one of them, JP, is on driver. Why is driver recruiting and retention one of the headlines of the week? What's going on? Like, what's the deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? With the economic fundamentals that have been pushing more and more freight through the economy and driving up the capacity, the demand for truckload capacity, right?
Yeah.
So we have things like overall GDP growth. We have things like accelerated manufacturing activity, accelerated construction activity, which all creates competition for vocational laborers like truck drivers. And so it's the same thing that makes people want to move more freight creates a driver shortage almost inherently.
If you had to say, of the many different things that drivers say they would like to, these are their issues for why they leave or why they don't stick with it. If you had to say the number one reason what they want, what do you think it would be?
I think it's tied. I think there's two. I think it's pay and getting home.
Well, you must already be doing your research because I think that's pretty accurate. Actually, 55%, according to Driver IQ Recruitment and Retention Survey, 55% do report that total compensation is the primary reason, while 50% say that it's the time away. And I don't know ultimately what you can do about time away, but I know you can do a lot about a lot of the other issues. Total compensation being a large part of it.
Right.
But, there are actually many other things. I talked to Damon Langley of TMW, super smart dude, and has just so much to say on the subject.
What does he work on?
He works on he works on like a little bit of everything. I think his actual title is like. He's director of solution delivery, analytics, and decision support. So it's a little bit of everything.
Wow.
He sort of likens it. He's like, basically, like what I like about his approach is like, how about if you hire smart and if you hire with like, being straight up, just disclosive about, hey, I'm going to be like a tough coach with you. And I'm going to say, I have expectations and I want you to have expectations. And right from the beginning, these are the kinds of things that you're going to have to deal with that we're going to, ask of you. And,
right.
And he, in a kind of a really interesting way, that I find is he likens it to thinking of addressing drivers' needs to Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Interesting.
And you're familiar with the famous Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I assume.
Of course. You start off with, your food and shelter, and you
your
end
basic
up
needs.
at self-actualization.
Yes. Now, I don't know if he's like actually aiming for self-actualization for drivers. That would be, just something that I think we would all aspire to. But first of all,
that's why we're here.
Yes, indeed, and drinking our delicious beer. But basic needs are levels 1 and 2: safety needs, security, safety, physiological needs, food, warmth, all those things. But then it's levels 3 and 4 that I think that we would want to get to for drivers.
Feeling of belonging.
Oh yes, belongingness and love needs, the friendship. What's level 4? I forget. It's esteem needs, prestige, and a feeling of accomplishment. Like if we can get there by building a positive culture, by being straight up with holding everybody accountable, that might go a long way.
Right, giving people goals and
Yes.
that are achievable and helping them accomplish that.
Yes,
That's part of a team.
So it's one of the it's as Langley says, it's conspicuously absent, like just setting expectations for both employee and employer for the duty and responsibilities of the job. And he says we generally assume that drivers know their job, and that is true, to a large extent. But it helps to create trust, to establish clear expectations from the very beginning. And I just think that it's a topic that we are, we're exploring that is important because we're actually hiring more than ever in the industry.
Right. That's what's so fascinating about the so-called driver shortage is that there's lots of people coming into the industry. They're just not going to the largest carriers, and the largest carriers are scratching their heads trying to figure out why. And
they're paying big bonuses, which is which is an increase. You mentioned earlier you said something like all labor costs are actually going up.
So I listened to the Knight Swift earnings call yesterday after the end of trading, and they were basically saying that it's not just driver pay that's going up, but it's really all costs associated with labor. So they're talking about marketing for jobs, recruiting people, processing their applications, retaining people, even the mechanics in the shop. Their wages are going up. It's harder to retain and find good people with them. And so it's not driver pay is a big part of it, and we're seeing about 30% of the rate increases that carriers are taking
really
are going directly, quickly, and efficiently plowing them back into driver wages.
I wonder if it's starting to become the number one fixed cost, even over fuel now. But we don't know that.
Yeah, but it's even more than just wages. It's really everything.
Yep.
All of the costs managing the workforce.
It's all tied into the capacity crunch.
Yeah.
And us talking about shippers and transparency.
Right, and the problem with the big carriers is that for the most part, they're really poaching drivers from each other. Swift is kind of unique in that it really serves as the industry's school or your driver academy. They almost specialize in recruiting new drivers, training them, bring them through. But if you look on social media, like if you look at the subreddit for truckers, you'll see a lot of kind of shade being thrown at Swift drivers for running into things and wrecking their basically being newbies, right? And everyone likes to hate on them, but of course, no one wants to admit that all the other big carriers are hiring Swift drivers after they've completed their sort of apprenticeship. A couple years later, they become Landstar drivers or Werner drivers or Cummins drivers.
And I almost wonder if that. Okay, we need to look at that a little bit closer, because does that undermine the very premise of what we're saying, which is to develop a good company culture and hire with clear expectations?
Yeah, well, we can talk about that, but Kevin Knight, the chairman of Knight Swift, was basically saying that Swift has actually had a lot of difficulty with cultural changes after the merger. I think their number of operating trucks is down 8% year over year for the first quarter.
Okay.
So they've had a lot of people leave. They've instituted more stringent hiring practices.
Which is what I think you should do.
Yeah, and it's, they
say... It's just a tough job, isn't it? And you can't get around you're not going to be at home.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's that, and it's also... do companies want to put in the time to find people who are actually suited to the lifestyle and can perform well at the job, or do they just want to find a warm body to throw in a cab and see how long they'll last?
Right. And will total compensation really enter the fray, in that it's the number one reason why there is so much turnover? Right. Okay, well, stay tuned on that, because I bet you there's more legs to that story. I bet it's a developing story. Well, we're also talking about, today was the big day for company earnings, as the end of Q1 of 2018 comes into focus. What have we learned today throughout this week?
So we've been covering a lot of earnings calls. You can see them on FreightWaves.com. I think the short version is that business is very good.
Yep. And
companies are all making money. It's interesting that they're sort of doing it in different ways, though. So, for example, we were just talking about Knight Swift, right? Yeah. Which is by far the largest truckload carrier in the United States, the product of that historic mega merger back in the fall of 2017 that's created, essentially like a $5 billion company.
Wow. Didn't know that.
Yeah, they're massive. And their revenue, though, if you take Knight, right?
Yeah.
Transportation, you take Swift Transportation, and you take because they were separate companies in the first quarter of 2017, you take their revenues and add them together, it's basically the same as Knight Swift's revenue in first quarter 2018. They haven't grown their revenue that much.
Really?
But what they've really done is greatly improve their operating income, and they've become a lot more efficient.
Makes sense.
They've maintained the same revenue, even though they're operating fewer trucks. They're
increasing efficiencies, which is a frequent thing.
Their length of haul is shorter.
And in spite of that, they're maintaining, I would think that they have overcome a lot. In order to be the same year over year after a massive merger like that, they must be doing a lot of things right.
Yeah, listen to this. Swift Transportation's operating truck fleet is down 8% year over year from first quarter 2017. That's a big, sort of contraction in a way.
Okay.
But revenues are flat. So they're getting more out of their trucks.
They're
enjoying these rate increases. Particularly, I want to say Knight Transportation's truckload operation. So not their trucking operation, not their logistics operation. Their trucking operation improved its operating revenue by 790 basis points, so
Wow.
7.9% down to 81.6%, which as far as I know is like, industry leader. So on the one hand, Knight Swift, flat revenue, better operating ratio. Landstar, on the other hand, we saw is really growing their revenue, and that's how they're making their money in this environment.
Before we segue to Landstar real quick, I just wanted to make a comparison to a company's earnings that I covered today.
Oh, yeah, sure.
UPS, they also are huge in their own LTL space, the biggest, and they have they've grown tremendously year over year, double digits just into it. So I think it's interesting, though, the main story of them is similar. They're going to be consolidating. They're going to be increasing their efficiencies. They all really wanted to point that out. They even hired a C-level executive who's like the executive of transformation.
Wow.
Like, yeah. And so, and
Transformers,
more
than meets the eye.
Wow, that is that's old school, dude. That's what they're going for. They are trying to be transformers in the industry, even though they're the biggest. I have a sense that they procedurally know what they're doing, in that they're expanding manufacturing in the places they need to. They're updating their air freight in the places they are. They feel balanced in Europe. They're dealing with the unevenness in the U.S.
Yeah, you're telling me before we started recording that they took a huge chunk of money, billions of dollars, a few years ago,
a couple billion,
and put it into their business, and they're about 2/3 of the way through.
Yeah, in 2000, I think it was 2013 or 14. They took out $2 million. They invested $2 billion in the company, which they said today they are 70% of the way through. And and it was all these same points.
Right. So there's still. So basically, we should still expect, greater network density, greater productivity, greater, just
I
revenue,
think, right? They were asked, are the changes that they're making, they were asked, are these defensive or offensive changes you're making?
Interesting.
And
I love these like Wall Street analysts on these calls who are always like try to like poke and prod, and try to get the story.
What do you think they're going to say? Of course, the CEO,
offensive.
Abernathy.
Of course.
He jumps in and says, "Look, we feel like we're being offensive. If we waited much longer, we would be defensive." So, and that's my sense. Hey, if you're being profitable right now and you got some good strategies, you're as big as you are, you're dealing with the expected and unexpected headwinds, and still coming out the way you are year over year, it's impressive. I think UPS is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Tell me about Landstar, and let's move on from the earnings.
Okay, so
what are some other overview ideas?
Landstar had record quarterly revenues for the first quarter of 2018 and record gross profits. Covenant, managed to do a lot better. Covenant's main problem is that it's with the driver shortage.
Yeah.
They're a little bit exposed because they really, their wheelhouse
is the team driver.
They kind of specialize in the team driver thing. First quarter last year, I want to say that their teams were about 39% of their fleet, and now it's like 34-ish% of their fleet.
It's hard to maintain for a number of reasons.
It's twice as hard, right?
Yeah.
For every truck, right?
Yeah.
You have to have two guys, or a man and a woman, or two women. And so we all know that 2017, the first half of 2017, was a particularly rough time for trucking. They barely squeaked by with a 99.8% operating revenue in the first quarter of 2017. They managed to improve that by 410 basis points for this quarter. So they're doing their thing.
Yeah.
They're making money. And so, like I said, the story is that basically all of the truckload carriers are reporting positive results.
In the capacity crunch, no surprises there. If there is a surprise.
But the capacity crunch, though, it doesn't, it increases their costs in a lot of ways.
I see what you mean.
know
Yeah,
what I mean?
absolutely.
It's not just like
Right,
a sort of unmitigated
labor costs.
positive.
Absolutely.
But
Good point.
Some carriers are growing revenue a lot. Some carriers are focusing on efficiency and cutting costs.
Yes.
And for example, maximizing your revenue.
Really,
per
I think
tractor per
everybody
week.
should be doing that.
Yeah, and so it's interesting to see the different situations of each carrier and how they're adapting to their own market, their own lanes. The other one thing I wanted to mention about Knight-Swift, which I found particularly interesting, was that the Swift side of the brand has a heavy dedicated fleet, meaning that these are long-term 2, 3, 4 year contracts with big shippers, like your Walmarts, your Home Depots, that sort of thing. And they're running those. They only saw a 0.1% growth in dedicated revenue year over year because those rates were all locked in at a time when trucking was in the doldrums and carriers were being forced to accept fairly low rates. And so that's one thing. That's
in trucker lingo, what Walmart is called? Wally World.
Wally World, yeah.
You knew that.
Everyone
I should have
knows
waited
that.
for
Everyone
it.
knows that.
No, everyone does
That's
not
what
know that.
That's what my parents called it in Powell when Walmart was the only store in the entire town.
Oh.
But anyway, so
Everyone knows that.
Just to wrap that up, Knight-Swift's drive toward greater efficiency and greater revenues and greater margins is a little bit being held back by Swift's heavy dedicated long-term contracts, which, since the second half of 2017, rates have gone up a lot.
Makes sense.
But the dedicated contracts have been the same.
That is some high-level analysis there, dude. I think that makes sense. Why? Let's see. Turning to our third and
the great egg story of 2018.
Exactly.
And the romaine. Let us discuss. You get that?
I do. I got that.
Let us discuss.
That's
some
terrible.
Produce
and you're
recalls.
just reinforcing it.
Yes.
Let us discuss this. Basically, it's okay. So there's some massive recalls that happened this week, both with 200 million eggs might have been suspected of having salmonella. Yikes!
Right.
And then there were 20 some states that were suspected of having E. coli in their romaine lettuce. And you know what my answer to it all is just don't eat greens. You know what I mean? Does anybody have recalls of Doritos? No. Right.
Yeah, or even just don't eat raw food, right?
Right. Like Twinkies. The shelf life of Twinkies is amazing. You could have a Twinkie for 2 years and it would still not have salmonella.
To the survivalists out there, in your underground bunkers, with your your gold bullion, and you're gonna have Twinkies right next to that.
But if you must worry about these things, which I guess we do, how could blockchain, our sophisticated ledger technology, which would lock in shipment data and process it instead of days in mere seconds? Well, how could this help our current sophisticated and only growing more sophisticated system? How would it?
I think the basic answer is that with blockchain, you have incredibly more granular tracking and trace. You have an unlimited number of data points that you can hash into the blockchain. And so the idea is that you get rid of these national recalls. At this point, you
wouldn't even have to have the recall in the first place.
Well, you might have a recall, but instead of,
but you would be able to track it.
The point is that
better
instead of so maybe 5 million eggs got recalled, or maybe
it's 200 million.
No, I'm saying maybe 5 million eggs actually had salmonella.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Which is still a
But
lot.
you don't know which of the 200 million eggs those 5 million were that you put out, that you shipped out. And so you have to recall them all.
You have to crack the code.
With blockchain, in theory, you would be able to more precisely identify exactly where in the supply chain the contamination happened, and then sort of limit and localize any kind of recall just to those, what was it in a specific plant on a specific day that the contamination happened, then you only have to recall those. And so,
well, that's kind of honestly what they already do, to be honest. They try to do it really fast. Like they identified within a couple of days that it seemed to be coming from the Yuma, Arizona region. But I do think that the blockchain would be able to help.
Right. Seemed to be coming from the Yuma, Arizona region, but I'm saying like, ideally, with blockchain, it would be like, okay, it's these shipments from 1 in the morning until 11 in the morning from this factory. That's the actual problem. That's the only stuff that needs to be recalled. And we know exactly where those eggs went, and we can account for them instead of having this massive, costly, and not to mention the sort of PR costs of.
Yes, that's part of it.
National recall, 200 million eggs. I mean, that's that makes the news. A localized recall of you call up some grocery store managers and tell them to throw some eggs in the compactor. Doesn't make the news, and you kind of skate free.
And actually, one of our resident editorial writers actually really looked into this. Zach Strickland looked into how do grocery stores get rid of the eggs? It was hard to find an answer for a while. He even reached out to the FDA.
And the National Egg Board.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the FDA said that they don't even that their focus is on just how do they immediately remove potentially adulterated products from the commerce, and that was kind of their answer. They weren't focused on stopping it in the first place. They're more on how do we get rid of it as fast as possible in mass.
Yeah, we were kind of interested in this as a potential reverse logistics story, right?
Which didn't turn out to be.
So it was kind of like, okay, they're recalling 200 million eggs. Are they taking them out of the stores and then shipping them back to somewhere and testing them? How many truckloads is this involved? Is it reefer? But they're already spoiled. Maybe it doesn't need a reefer. We're looking into it. So he was calling the FDA. They didn't know.
Right. Nobody knew. Nobody would give him an answer.
He was calling the managers.
He finally got a back market guy in the meat department who verified what I already told him.
They throw them away.
They throw them away. That's it.
Right.
So there isn't even a real. So could blockchain help with that? Well, I don't know, but maybe there would be less of them in the first place.
No, I think blockchain would help with
telling
who to throw away which eggs more precisely. So there's less.
Blockchain is the magic technology.
No. Blockchain would be less waste
in the first place.
No. With
yes, less waste in the first place. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If a contamination happens, you only get rid of the stuff that you think was actually contaminated instead of having to cover all your bases and throw everything away.
Yeah, even if you don't have to have special delivery trucks to do so.
Excellent.
Exactly. All right, well, is it time to play the best thing that we do every week, which is so exciting? Big deal or little deal? Well, I guess it is since I'm asking.
It's time.
Okay, thanks for the verification. I'm going to begin by asking you these questions, and I'm going to begin right now. Container ship traffic is humming along. Big deal or little deal?
Little deal, but the fact that fleet idle capacity is only at 1% means that any uptick in demand will result in higher rates.
Secretary Mnuchin is trying to diffuse trade tensions. Big deal or little deal?
Big deal. Mnuchin is basically trying to undo all of the damage on NAFTA, on Russian aluminum, and on China tariffs, and hopefully it works out.
Truck tonnage down again in March as capacity constraints take hold. Big deal or little deal?
It's a little deal. There's always a first quarter downturn, but it's definitely something to keep our eye on. We want to make sure that those numbers recover going into summer. Volvo Truck innovations are still focused on the driver. Big deal or little deal?
Little deal. Hey, we dig their innovations in design, fuel efficiency, driver productivity, and safety. But just because they're focusing still on the driver doesn't mean autonomous ain't coming.
Housing activity improved to start the spring, providing another boost to freight activity. Big deal or little deal?
Big deal. Our economy is a big deal. Big gains in the West and the South helped offset declines in the Northeast and Midwest, leaving the economy with the largest monthly gain in new home sales since last November. And housing activity drives all kinds of freight stuff, going with boosts in lumber and sheetrock and other demands in building materials and construction.
Proposal to alter Oklahoma trucking regulation dies, but not without some fireworks.
Little deal, fascinating story. The bill would have taken the Oklahoma Corporation Commission, which regulates some aspects of trucking in the Sooner State. It would have taken that out of regulating trucks and I guess put it on the Department of Public Safety, but it is not going to do that. So little deal.
Wow.
Just in time. Thank you,
squeaked.
production manager Barry, for keeping us on.
I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention the fact that this big deal, little deal win was brought to us by our new sponsor,
Link America. Shout out.
Your link to reliable shipping.
Thank you, Link America, for sponsoring this. How exciting. For the first time, we've got our very first sponsor, and they are local. So way to go, Freight Alley.
Yeah, they're like a broker that's like not like other freight brokers. They've got some trucks of their own.
They're a 4PL.
Yeah. Exactly.
Not just a 3PL.
Check them out. It's LYNC America.
And that'll do it for the big stories this week. As always, we go into more detail about each of the topics we've talked about today on our website, FreightWaves.com. We will continue to publish this podcast weekly, so be sure to subscribe to What the Truck on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Also, make sure to leave us a review to let us know what you think of our new podcast.
And if you're into learning about technology that's shaping up the industry, you definitely want to be at Transparency 18 in Atlanta this May. Visit transparency18.com to learn more about the event.
That'll do it for today. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next week on What the Truck.